We're on our maiden voyage of our very first podcast, Scotty. This is Johnson, Vorhees and Martucci's first podcast. I'm Roger Johnson.
This is Scott Vorhees.
Where's the Martucci?
He's actually in trial right now, which is a pretty good place to be for a trial attorney law firm, I think.
So the point is, Johnson, Vorhees and Martucci is trial lawyers. Some trial lawyers actually try cases in front of a jury, part of that old system that's been in place for hundreds of years. And the Martucci's actually doing that today.
Right. Patrick Martucci's at trial. I know he wanted to be here for our first one. And because we don't have any listeners yet, we should probably tell them what we're planning to do and kind of who we are. You want to start with that?
What are we planning to do?
Well, it's a series of podcasts that are designed to help people get to know us and know what we do and why what we do matters for society, basically.
So we've chosen the first topic for today, maybe is a good one for a maiden voyage, and that's what we do that makes a difference, why the lawyer you choose makes a difference. That's something that oftentimes people aren't even thinking about, that they want to have to think about, is who do I choose for a lawyer? Do I ever need a lawyer? Or why do I need a lawyer? So that's the topic today, why a lawyer makes a difference.
Before we get to that, let me tell them just this much about you, if you don't mind. So Roger Johnson, I'm proud to say, is my partner and has been for, 17 years now, seems like, something like that.
January 2002, what are we at now? April 2019, that's 17.
That's crazy. Yeah, and one thing that I want to make sure that everybody knows is that there's a reason that JVM, the Johnson, Vorhees and Martucci, continues to exist and has 3 offices and 27 employees now, or whatever it is because we practice law the way that we think the law should be practiced. And I can't think of a better thing to do with my life than to help people who have been hurt. And so we need to tell everybody who doesn't already know us that our practice is limited to personal injury. And it is to help people who've been hurt and have horrible bad things happen or loved ones killed seek some level of compensation through the court system.
Serious personal injuries, wrongful deaths, people who have their lives changed suddenly oftentimes because of somebody's poor choice, carelessness, recklessness. That's what we do.
Right. The other thing that's kind of fun is because people know lawyers through advertising, we are just starting to this medium to let people know, because in the old days, you didn't have to advertise.
You know, I had to be talked into advertising to start with. You'll remember this because it's been 15 years ago, even though the years slip by fast. But it used to be people look down on lawyers that advertise, and it's almost a necessity nowadays, but there's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it.
I still look down on some lawyers that advertise, by the way.
Depending on how they're doing it.
Right.
Before we jump to that, let's back up a step again. You know, we're going to talk about other people's choices and why the choices are important for them when they're having to determine who they need to help them in the type of work that we do. But you and I made choices a bunch of years ago. We made choices that were, at the time, taking risk,
right,
and ended up being life-changing choices. And as we've talked about over the years, probably one among the top 5 best choices I've made is deciding to be partners with you and then adding Martucci to that a few years later.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question about it.
And partly that's because the mindset is the same. You know, I mean, for a partnership to work, for lawyers to do what they ought to do to create honor in the profession and to make a real difference in people's lives, the right mindset's got to be there out of the gate. But in what we're doing, it's one person each time. It's that person who we're making a difference for. And when the right outcome occurs, you know, it's just a whole different feeling of satisfaction that you've actually you've put somebody back in control of their lives when they thought they'd completely lost control.
You and I basically started with, 2 staff 17 years ago with this idea that we want to start a law firm that treats people the way they ought to be treated and isn't afraid to try cases. And you know what? It probably means that, at least initially, we're not going to make as much money as we could at other places, certainly not where we had previously been employed. And that's okay, because there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And no matter what, we're going to do it the right way.
Well, that's what we're talking about with mindset.
Right.
The mindset we've always had consistently, day in, day out, is a client-centered, client-caring concept. And one with substance rather than just surface, one that's not just pretense but's real, and that's I hope how we treat people every day that we're doing the work that we do.
And I think I'm going to stop you there for a second when you say how we treat people, because when you say client-centered, what I love about our law office is how we treat people who aren't our clients. I think that we were always treating people with honor and respect. And unfortunately, there are a lot of folks who come to us who had terrible things happen. I mean, just horrible events in their lives. And we've made a commitment that we're going to spend time with those folks and help explain why it is we can't help them and why the bad law says that, hey, this doctor can't be sued because of more than 2 years or whatever it is. And I think that we have decided that we care about people, even if they're not clients and couldn't ever be clients. And I think the reason for that is because we'll explain it. I don't know how many people we've talked to who said, hey, I talked to another attorney who said he can't help me. Well, but he didn't tell you that you were out of time, that you're past your statute of limitations, or that this isn't a claim, or he never gave you any explanation. Like, no, I never got to talk to an attorney. I just got a letter. And again, I think there's a way to treat people and a way to not treat people. And so what I would like to think is that everybody who interacts with our law office, from our receptionist, Stacy, who answers the phone, to any of us, you, the managing partner, that they always know that they are important to us.
Yeah, and this is going to seem like we're just patting ourselves on the back a whole lot, and I don't want it to seem that way. The only way a person can really know is if they have talked with us, talked with other clients of ours, and we're getting a lot of folks that are coming in that are being referred by other clients. But that does make a difference in who you choose. If you've been able to have some level of confidence that somebody else has used these folks and has had the right experience, or you at least have a conversation with the people that are going to be taking care of you and know that they do really feel like they care rather than just trying to recruit my case in.
So we're talking about the lawyers you choose and why it makes a difference. And one of the things that you started to touch on there is, I see these billboards and I see these YouTube ads, or I see TV ads or whatever it is. And I'm trying to figure out, if I were not an attorney, but I was somebody who was hurt and needed help, how do I know to look past the glitter and the glam and all of this stuff and pick a lawyer who's really right for me in my case? And so that's one of the things I want to make sure that we talk about in easy bullet point fashion, if nothing else, to say, hey, if you don't hear anything else here, here's a couple things that might help you know how to pick the right attorney and why it matters. So one expression my mom used to have when I was growing up is this thing called a wolf in sheep's clothing. Oftentimes, something may on the surface look like this is terrific. I mean, this nice-looking lawyer in this ad, or 400 million served. I mean, the McLawyer out there that's on the billboards. This must look great. But what's really deep down in that person? Is that person really going to help me? And if you jump into something like that, then at the end of it, what you're going to have is the stereotypical lawyer that creates dishonor to the profession instead of honor to the profession. I think that's what we're talking about. And if anybody's still listening to this, that's what we want to get across to them, is our profession should be honorable. It's historically honorable. But unfortunately, there's too many times that out of greed or out of self-interest, or just because of the arrogance that sometimes our profession is perceived to have, people end up the relationship with a lawyer thinking lawyer just reinforces my notions of what a lawyer is, and it's a bad thing. So how do you decide not to go to what you call the McLawyer, or the lawyer who advertises who's not who you ought to do? Is there an easy screening mechanism? And so I'm thinking about this. What's the easiest way to know who not to pick? And what I was thinking about is, if you're in a car wreck and you get an unsolicited letter, so if somebody just sends you a letter you didn't ask for, that's from a lawyer, and says, hey, can I help you with your car wreck claim? Don't hire that lawyer, okay? That's the number one sign that you don't want that person as your attorney. What else?
Well, so that's a great example right there. Braggadocio, I mean, maybe somebody listening to this is going to think these guys are bragging. I hope not. But braggadocio is something that really ought to create some red alerts.
Now, when you say that, what do you mean by braggadocio?
Well, so if you're acting like you've never lost a case in your entire life with some of your advertising, or you put something out there like that, or you've got somebody giving testimonials for you that probably is an actor, or you've got or you've got again, the billboard type ad, 400 million in settlements, not talking at all about how much actually gets into the client's pocket from those, or whether they actually collected on them. That type of thing ought to give one a little bit of reserve.
So let me stop you and talk about some of those real quick. I think it's important for people to know that you and I try cases and we lose cases. Are you ashamed to say that you lose a case?
It hurts bad to lose a case. I always think that the jury got it wrong when I lose a case. But any trial lawyer loses cases, and I have good conversations with folks before we ever get to trial, hoping that they're going to have a meaningful choice to make before we get there. But sometimes the only choice is to take the case to the jury, and yet I can't. I've tried over 100 cases. I can't think of any case where after the jury trial, the client was thinking, I steered them wrong to get them there, or I did wrong by them. And that's what, even in the losses, is a silver lining with it, that the client at least leaves it feeling like they've been able to, even though through a loss, have a sense of closure to what had happened to them. And as you know, there have been times that they can even have the knowledge that they've made positive change even with a loss that's occurred.
So I was thinking about that. One of the advertisements, I can't remember the firm, it doesn't matter, but it says that they haven't ever lost a case. I'm thinking, well, if you haven't lost a case, you can't have tried very many. Or you only take the slam dunk cases where there's not really a dispute, where that person probably didn't need an attorney in the first place. Part of the reason that we're trial attorneys is because there can be legitimate disputes about whether or not somebody's at fault, or how much, or what ought to happen. And so I think if we only took cases that were slam dunk winners, then that means there's a whole lot of people out there who have rights where they need to get a jury trial. They can't get to it. And so when I see somebody advertising that they've never lost a case, I'm thinking they probably haven't tried very many, and I sure as heck don't want them to work for me.
Well, as you know, what happens is it almost becomes an assembly, like a manufacturing plant, an assembly line type of business. You have a whole bunch of clients, as many as you can grab a hold of, and you settle them cheap. I mean, if you can...
Volume.
It's volume. If you can settle them cheap without having the expenses you need to put into the case to fund it, if you're going to be working the case up, which we do. None of our clients have to come up with a retainer. None of our clients have to get a monthly bill from us. We're funding the case. But if you're lawyers that don't litigate cases, don't try cases, you don't have to put much money into the case. You settle them cheap, and you don't put much money in it. So it's a very low risk situation for the lawyer, but the client ends up going home with maybe a little bit of a difference made, but not as much difference as can be made for them if they have trial lawyers taking care of their case the right way.
So the second piece of that is, okay, so that's how those marketing lawyers work. How does the person who's injured, who's looking for an attorney, how do they know if this person is just one of those marketing attorneys, or is this somebody who really knows where the courthouse is and how to try a case? How do you know?
Well, there's a couple of ways one could know. One could straight out ask,
crazy talk.
Have you ever tried a case to the jury?
Yes.
And if the answer to that's once about 25 years ago, that might create a little bit of reluctance.
Okay.
Now, you might get lied to, so you could ask others. You could say, I want to look at reviews. You could actually compare results, real results that sometimes websites have about other people that have hired a firm and actually gone to trial with that firm. Sometimes there's cases that are published in newspapers and are published through the Court of Appeals. So, every profession has a vetting that goes on typically before somebody gets hired. Especially big businesses or big corporations or governments, they vet people before they hire them. Shouldn't somebody that's going to be hiring a lawyer when their life has been devastated by something that's happened to them, shouldn't they vet who they're going to have a little bit?
The should conversation is always interesting because I don't know what they should or shouldn't do in that situation. I know a lot of people are just hurting and they need somebody to help take this stress or this hurt away, and they don't feel like they have the time or really even the ability to go out and interview a bunch of different attorneys or to do research or any of that. And that's one of the reasons why I hope we have listeners now, is because when you're in the moment, I don't want you to have to think about that. What I hope is that they get a sense of that ahead of time, and that they get from this and from seeing us in the community and other things, a sense of who we are rather than that. It's amazing to me the number of people who just hired the first attorney that they talked with. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because oftentimes the first attorney they talk with is a general practitioner. I went to the person who helped me with my will, or I went to the person who helped me with my speeding ticket, or I went to the person who helped me with my adoption. And it's probably important for folks who are listening to know that we do one thing here. We help people who have been hurt, who have had serious injury or wrongful death of a loved one. I guess technically our bar license says that we could help you with your adoption and your speeding ticket and your real estate deal and your contracts. And
we'll help you find somebody that does those things, but it's not going to be us.
Well, and even though technically we might be able to, I think you want us to stick with what we're really, really good at, And so we have limited our practice to this area. And I wouldn't go to a general practitioner or doctor and say, you know what, I got to have this brain surgery. You went to medical school, so can you help me out with the brain surgery thing here? No, I'm going to go to a guy who only does neurosurgery. And I think that it's important for folks to know, if you've been in an injury event of some kind, you probably want a law firm that specializes or limits their practice just to that area.
Well, it used to be when I first started practicing law, and maybe still is in some rural communities, that you had general practitioners that did a little bit of everything.
Right.
But as is true with your example of medicine, same is true in the law. It's become increasingly a niche that people do, specialize it. And I mean, look, we would be dangerous we would hurt somebody if we decided to try to do their bankruptcy, or if we decided to help them get their divorce. They might end up still married after that, but it would not be a good thing. But you don't want to hire a lawyer to take on your malpractice case if they've only done 2 malpractice cases in their life, or if they've never done one. They may be a terrific wills and estates lawyer, but not only do you not want to do that because they won't handle it personally, they're going to refer them out. If they did handle it personally, they would make mistakes that would damage the ability to bring the claim.
You talk about the ability to bring a claim too, not just from the client point of view, but it reminded me a little bit about malpractice cases are expensive. My guess is most listeners don't have any idea how expensive it is to bring a complex medical malpractice case to trial. What do you think the average cost is if you went start to finish from the injury all the way through a trial of a typical complex medical malpractice case?
Let's say birth injury case.
Okay.
Complex case, going to have multiple experts are going to be involved. There may be catastrophic damages that a baby has from not having enough oxygen during the delivery process. And the babies may have needs for the rest of his or her life. If you're a lawyer that's going to work that case up, you're going to spend $100,000 plus before the case is finished, especially if it goes to trial. You may have $150,000 in the case before it goes to trial. That's considerable risk for most lawyers to take on.
Right.
And so not only that, with a malpractice case, there's always the chance that the doctor is going to get the benefit of the doubt. And even if the evidence is overwhelming, that the jury will still vote for the doctor for some bogus reason. I mean, that happens from time to time. So to have the best chance of success, you got to have somebody that knows those types of things and can hire the right experts wherever they're at in the country that are going to come across credibly, going to come across reasonably, and that a jury is going to respond to. And it's then, I mean, we settle 80% of our malpractice cases, before trial occurs, not before a lawsuit occurs, before trial occurs, and after we've typically got $50,000 plus in the case, we get them settled. But it's because the other side knows that we're ready to go to trial and persuade a jury in a courtroom otherwise.
One of the things that's probably worth talking about too is what happens with those expenses, the $50,000 or $100,000 that's invested in a claim, if it turns out that the jury doesn't award any money. And I think that some people know that in our profession, at least, if there's no recovery, there's no fee. Well, there's also no recovery, no fee, no expenses. And the way that you and I have decided to handle expenses is just a little different than a lot of other attorneys around with the way that we handle expenses, even when we win. So let's make sure that's clear for anybody who's listening. First of all, if we don't get any of our clients any money, what do they owe us?
Zero, even if we've spent money on the case.
Right. And so if we happen to have $100, $1,000, $100,000 in a claim, and we don't get the client any money, there's no chance that that person can take money out of their wallet or their purse and give it to us.
Zero chance.
But unlike some other firms, even when we win, we share in those expenses.
Again, if folks are still listening to this is a major difference in how we do it and how most other lawyers that handle complex cases do it, okay? If you're a client and you're going to ask a lawyer to take your case on, one of the things you want to know is how's the expenses going to be handled, okay? And most of the people do our work are going to fund the case rather than get a retainer. But at the end of the case, all of the expenses get taken out of the client share, all of them. And what we've decided to do instead, because it's more fair and it creates better stewardship over the money, is at the end of the case, our fee is on the net instead of on the gross. Meaning, if we settle a case for $1 million and we've had $100,000 in the case, our fee's on the 900 instead of on the million. But there are many law firms around that the fee's on the entire amount. And if they spend $200,000, it's all coming out of the client's share, and they're still getting their full fee off the total settlement. It impacts the ability to settle a case because the bottom line is affected.
Right.
I mean, we've seen situations that we've heard about from folks where they were at other law firms and they ended up not being able to settle a case because there was so many expenses in the case that the offer was going to be just barely over the expenses, or not enough over to where they would end up bottom lining anything.
It's not always about the money. One of the things that you and I have been consistent about over the years is understanding that the attorney-client relationship is really a relationship. And it's been amazing to me the quality people that we've come in contact with over the years, whether we could help them or we couldn't help them, or we won or we lost a trial. And to me, the important thing that we do is we help people. And sometimes we help them by giving them answers. Sometimes we help by getting them some money. Most often we help by letting them know that we're on their side, that we are here to walk through this terrible tragedy that's happened to them so that they're not alone and they don't have to face it alone. And I think if I were to tell somebody what's most important when you're looking for an attorney, is you got to have that connection, that feeling that this attorney that I'm about to place my trust in to help me through the worst time in my life is somebody who cares and somebody who respects me and is going to listen to me and do whatever they can to help me put my life on the right track. And the thing that, candidly just pisses me off about attorneys who market is that they're taking this, what I think of as a sacred trust that we have been given, and we've gone through schooling and we've been licensed to help these folks, and they're throwing that sacred trust into the gutter just to make money. And that's what ticks me off. And to me, if I could give one piece of advice other than don't hire the attorney who sends you letters that you didn't ask for, and don't just go to somebody who does everything, would be talk with whatever attorney you're thinking about hiring and make sure that you feel like you have been listened to and understood and respected. And if you have any doubt at all, do not hire that person.
And so we see this sometimes when lawyers get fired that a client had previously hired,
right,
and we get hired instead. And one of the things I hear from folks that do that decide to hire us after letting somebody else go, he never would return my phone calls. I didn't have any clue what was happening in my case, and time was passing, and I didn't know if anything was happening in my case. I would call and leave a message, and nobody would ever respond back. I would email, and nobody would respond back. So, that's just basic human decency for one thing. If you're representing somebody that's just had a bad thing happen, I tell folks, my job is to reduce your stress, not add to your stress.
Right.
Every single day, I'm sending emails out in the evening time, in the morning before I come into the office. I send text messages to clients. I know you do as well. The communication ought to occur in some format with today's technology within a 24-hour time frame of a person reaching out to us with a legal question. So I would hope and like to think that at our firm, and the reason we've grown into a regional practice now with 9 lawyers and 3 law offices, is that folks know they can trust us to communicate with them about any significant development, and that there are going to be significant developments without them having to wait freaking years before their case gets finished.
Yeah, I was amazed the other day. Somebody was talking with me about the fact that I give out my cell phone number. I used to write it on the back of my business card when I'd meet with folks, and now I'm too lazy, and so it's just printed on the back of my business card now. And I'm like, you give your business card with your cell phone on it to everybody you meet? And I said, yeah, why not? Like, don't people take advantage of that and then they call you? I bet in the last 12 years I've been doing that, I've had 2 people who have really abused the fact they have my cell phone number. Most people aren't going to be calling for no good reason. Most people who have serious injury and wrongful death like we help them with, they're not going to waste my time, and they're not going to call at weird hours of the night unless there's something important going on. And if they need to talk to their attorney, by golly, they ought to be able to talk to their attorney. And I agree with you. That's just, to me, basic decency.
Well, and we kind of started our conversation in part about this notion that our profession ought to be honorable.
Right.
And we've got a caricature instead that's been created by some trial lawyers. I mean, a trial lawyer is a terrific thing to be. It's the best gig going. And historically, it's been what's helped with the social fabric remaining intact, where justice can be had, rather than people who are poor and disadvantaged not having the ability to have their lives set right. So we ought to treat it as an honorable profession. That means, I was just pulling something on the web this morning, this thing, case runners, the real ambulance chasers, because I was trying to find out about the stereotype. Cappers, solicitors, steerers, ambulance chasers, bottom feeders are what the stereotype is. We can't feed into that stereotype. We've got to be different, and every day make clients know that we're going to take care of them, not just ourselves. And we're going to make a healthy living along the way. That's the reality of it. But it's because we're good at what we do. We're going to make a healthy living along the way. But we're going to make a difference for our clients' lives and help them, again, look at the future with dreams, with ambitions, with belief that their life can be better instead of be a wreck.
One of the things, again, kind of swinging back to the topic of how do we pick which attorneys we want to hire, is I want an attorney who cares not just about the case, but about me and about the community. And one of the things that we are blessed to be able to do with the Healthy Living is to give back and be involved in the community. And that's one of the things that, while you're researching an attorney, is don't look to see necessarily if they're just giving money, but see what they're involved in. See if they're giving some of their time and their talent, not just to try and line their own pockets, but are they doing any pro bono work? Are they donating their time? Are they involved in the legal causes in the community? They're going to make the community a better place to live. Because I think that's important to me if I were looking for an attorney. And that's one of the things I'm proud about. The law firm that you and I have been blessed to be a part of is that we do give back, not just with our money, but with our time and our talents. And we encourage our staff to. And so again, if I were trying to talk about the non-money reasons to hire an attorney, it'd be, what kind of character do you want your attorney to have? And I think you want an attorney who cares not just about you, but about the community. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do with the law is to make the community safer. I can't think of a case where somebody's been injured where we're not out there basically saying, look, we would hold this person or this business or this insurance company accountable for violating a safety rule. And so whether we're out there volunteering in the community or whether we're in the courtroom, I see us always doing the same thing. I want to make this community better and safer.
With that, let's take a short break and then we'll wrap up after we've thought through what else we want to say.
Perfect.
At Johnson, Vorhees and Martucci, we handle serious injury and wrongful death claims.
Proving the owner knew or could have known of the dangerous condition is something that is important.
A wrongful death case springs from a negligence claim of some type.
Any good personal injury attorney will give you a free consultation.
But just because you've been injured on someone else's property, such as fallen, doesn't mean you have a case.
If you're wondering whether or not you need to talk to an attorney about a car wreck, the answer is yes, you do.
So we're back after a break, and one of the things that is probably in the mind of some listeners is, okay, so it sounds a little bit like you guys are talking about all attorneys who advertise are bad, or that, if they got advertisements on TV or something, or maybe on YouTube, that they have to be a bad attorney. But don't you all advertise? I mean, clearly we advertise. So how can we sit here and throw stones? What do you think we tell folks when they're having those thoughts?
So here's what we don't do. We don't send letters to people who have just been injured. We don't have a capper that's going to go around chasing them and show up in their hospital room without being invited. We don't directly solicit in any way any client. We don't do that. Here's what we don't do. We don't have an ad out there that says, have you been injured recently, with a wrecked car and a lawyer with a business card ready to hand it out. I got talked into this, as we were talking about earlier, years ago, and I think there is ways to communicate to the public what we do and who we are effectively that I call sort of passive advertising. Mm-hmm. Maybe folks that are seeing this think, well, no, that's an active ad if it's on TV or if it's running across my Facebook.
It's interrupting what I'm already reading. So yeah,
but it is important that our name be branded out there for folks that maybe not have heard about us before, and that may be the only way that's getting across. But it's got to be tasteful. And I've had judges that are the old school type that have seen some of our ads and say, those ads don't bother me.
Right.
When I heard you guys were going to do advertising, I kind of, frowned about that. But then I saw the ad, and that doesn't bother me. And I ask juries whenever I begin a jury trial, how many of you have seen something that's an ad of ours, and did it offend you? And I got to tell you, I think about 99% of them have said, those ads don't bother me, even some of them that have said others that do. So we have some great marketing folks that help us put our ads out there in a right, tasteful way. And if anybody ever sees one that they don't think's that way, they need to let you or I know about that, because we'll need to revisit it.
Yeah, and I think that there's a difference between saying this is who we are and this is what we do, and chasing an ambulance or appearing to be one of those attorneys who's like looking for somebody to get hurt. Because you know what, you and I've talked a lot. I would love it if there weren't any other injury cases, if there weren't people out there breaking safety rules and people getting hurt. You and I,
we do estate planning.
We do something different. That's right. But as long as there are attorneys out there who are advertising, we sort of get forced into this. We have to compete in the market so people know that we're there and they know that they can come to us. But we try to make sure that we're doing it in a way that, again, is honorable and that just highlights the fact that this is who we are and what we do, and not that we would ever want to take advantage of a situation or want somebody to be injured. And so I think the content of the ad and the manner in which the ad is presented makes a big difference for me.
Well, and I really like the website type ad instead. Right. That's an ad, I guess, but It's a passive type way. I want people to look at www.fourstateslaw.com and go to our website, because I want them to click on your profile page. I want them to look at the blogs. I want them to look at the reviews that are on there. And I want them to see the number of verdicts that we've gone to and the changes that have been made positively in our region with the hard work we put in.
Sometimes we have to appeal judges' decisions. Sometimes we get the right result. But I think that if I were picking an attorney, I would want somebody who's not going to just take the first offer, but who is going to fight not just for me, but for everybody who's like me across the state. And so that's one of the things I hope that they hear from this podcast.
For the 2 or 3 people that are still listening to it at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the other things that's probably important that you and I assume, but some people don't know, is that it's important to have an attorney who's licensed in the state in which the claim has to be brought. Because we're here in the 4 states area, I hope that everybody understands that we handle claims in the 4 states. I'm licensed in Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kansas. And I'm amazed sometimes where we'll get a file from another law firm, and somebody's got an injury claim in Kansas, and they had a Missouri lawyer who started out with it, couldn't get it settled, and they're like, hey, you got to go find a Kansas attorney now, because you're going to have to go to court. And so, again, just as long as we're kind of covering some of the nuts and bolts about how do I pick which attorney to hire, you at least want an attorney who's licensed in the area where that case might have to be filed. So it's a little awkward, I got to tell you. This is my first podcast with this format, and so I'm pretty excited. I think it's an idea that has some interest for me. But what I really want to hear is from the listeners is, what do you want to hear? If you've got a couple of attorneys who are going to talk about whatever's on your mind, what challenges do you have as you're thinking about hiring an attorney, or what troubles you about the system, or how can we help explain anything or everything that has to do with the law or personal injury? We expect we're going to have more of these. We expect Patrick Martucci is going to be here for the next one. He's a whole lot more engaging and funny than Roger or I. I'm sure he would agree. But
he may even play his guitar or something in one.
He's got talent. I got to tell you. But I think we want to invite people to comment not just on this particular podcast if they've listened to any of it, but also send us ideas for what would you like to hear. What is it that we can help explain to you or help you understand about the law or the process or any piece of this?
So what I'm envisioning is we're going to do one of these maybe every 4 to 6 weeks that'll have a topic that we'll cover. But if we've got somebody that's got something going on in their lives and they really want a topic covered, all they got to do is send a note and we'll try to cover it.
Yeah, and we should put in the legal disclaimer here, considering we're lawyers, that the podcast is not intended to give specific legal advice about your situation. If you have something like that, call us. We can set up a consult. We're trying to give out general information overall about the process. So if you have a specific legal issue or a potential claim, call the law office at 417-206-0100. But what we're talking about generally is, hey, what are the kinds of things that we can expect with a personal injury claim?